Christmas has already passed, the calendar has turned, and life has quietly returned to routine. And this, according to Padre Pio, is exactly the moment when many believers begin to lose what they thought they had secured. Not because God has withdrawn, not because grace has expired, but because the most subtle and decisive phase of the spiritual battle always begins after the celebration, not during it. Padre Pio spoke with unsettling clarity about this early year period. He insisted that when the noise fades, when holy days are behind us and ordinary time resumes, the soul stands exposed. This is the season when peace is most often stolen not dramatically, but quietly, gradually, almost unnoticed. Padre Pio taught that the beginning of the year is a threshold. What passes through this threshold with discipline will be strengthened. What crosses it carelessly will fracture. He observed that many people enter the new year with good intentions, emotional momentum, and vague hope, yet without firm spiritual protection. They assume that because they prayed recently, attended Mass, or felt uplifted during the holidays, they are safe. Padre Pio warned that this assumption itself is the weakness. The enemy, he said, does not attack when people are vigilant and inspired, but when they believe vigilance is no longer necessary. In his spiritual direction, Padre Pio frequently returned to one central truth: grace must be guarded. He explained that divine help is never passive. God gives abundantly, but the human soul must actively cooperate, especially at the start of a new cycle. The early weeks of the year, he warned, are not neutral time. They set a pattern. Habits formed here become chains or shields later. Many of the disturbances people experience, sudden anxiety, unexplained heaviness, irritability, lack of peace, physical exhaustion, are not random misfortunes, but symptoms of an interior life that has been left unprotected at a critical moment. Padre Pio was particularly direct about peace. He said peace is not lost all at once, it is eroded. First prayer shortens, then silence becomes uncomfortable, then small irritations multiply. Then the soul begins to feel constantly tired, even without clear reason. He described this progression as a spiritual hemorrhage, slow, hidden, but dangerous if ignored. In the confessional, he encountered countless souls in January and February who could not explain why they felt empty, discouraged, or restless so soon after moments of spiritual intensity. His answer was firm. The soul was fed, but not fortified. He emphasized that the enemy prefers fatigue over sin. A tired soul resists less, prays less, and questions more. At the beginning of the year, when people return to work, responsibilities, and pressure, fatigue increases naturally. Padre Pio taught that without deliberate spiritual reinforcement, this fatigue becomes an open door. The person does not need to fall into grave wrongdoing to lose peace. Distraction alone is sufficient. This is why he insisted that ordinary time is not spiritually weaker than feast days. It is spiritually more dangerous. Illness, Padre Pio cautioned, often enters through this same opening. He never reduced sickness to spiritual causes alone, but he repeatedly taught that the human person is unified. When the soul becomes discouraged, the body becomes more vulnerable. He observed that many people begin the year carrying unresolved stress, resentment, or fear from the previous one. Without prayerful surrender, these interior burdens manifest physically: headaches, insomnia, lowered immunity, and chronic tension. He said, often follow spiritual neglect, not as punishment, but as consequence. Family conflict was another pattern he identified early in the year. Once celebrations are over, suppressed tensions surface, expectations clash with reality, old wounds reopen. Padre Pio warned that unresolved forgiveness becomes a breeding ground for spiritual unrest. He taught that the enemy exploits these moments by magnifying minor disagreements into deep divisions. A harsh word left unrepented, a resentment entertained in silence, can disturb peace far beyond what logic would suggest. For Padre Pio, the family was not merely a social unit, but a spiritual battlefield, especially when prayer disappears from daily life. One of Padre Pio's most sobering insights concerned false confidence. He said many believers confuse emotional consolation with spiritual strength. Feeling uplifted does not equal being fortified. When emotions settle, as they inevitably do at the start of the year, faith must stand on discipline, not feeling. Those who do not transition from emotional devotion to deliberate commitment, he warned, will feel abandoned even when God is close. This perceived abandonment is one of the most destructive illusions of the early year. Gratitude, Padre Pio insisted, is the antidote, but not superficial gratitude, disciplined remembrance. He urged souls to deliberately recall what God has already done, not what they hope he will do. At the beginning of the year, many focus exclusively on future outcomes, success, healing, solutions. Padre Pio warned that this forward-only gaze weakens the soul. Gratitude anchors faith in reality. Without it, hope becomes demand, and demand quickly turns into disappointment. Peace cannot survive where gratitude is absent. He also warned against postponing spiritual seriousness. Many tell themselves they will get back into prayer later in the year, once life settles. Padre Pio rejected this mindset completely. He taught that the beginning of the year is precisely when order must be established, not postponed. Delay, he said, is the enemy's most polite weapon. It never demands outright rejection of God, only constant deferral. By the time the soul realizes peace is gone, habits have already hardened. What made Padre Pio's warnings so unsettling was their accuracy. He did not speak in abstractions. He described patterns he had seen thousands of times. He knew that the loss of peace at the beginning of the year is not a mystery, but a spiritual law ignored. Light has been given. Now it must be protected. Silence has returned. Now the soul must choose whether it will listen to God or to distraction. This first part reveals the core of Padre Pio's message. The danger is not that Christmas has passed, but that many believe the most important work is already done. In reality, the decisive moment is now. The beginning of the year exposes what was received and what was merely felt. According to Padre Pio, this is not a season to drift, but a moment to stand guard. Those who understand this will grow stronger. Those who ignore it will spend the year trying to recover peace that could have been preserved from the start. At the beginning of the year, Padre Pio observed something even more unsettling than the loss of peace. Most people did not realize it was happening until it had already taken hold. He often said that spiritual danger rarely announces itself loudly. It does not begin with scandal or dramatic collapse. It begins with subtle shifts that feel harmless, reasonable, even normal. A prayer postponed, a confession delayed, a rosary shortened. Padre Pio warned that these small concessions are rarely accidental. They form a pattern that quietly reshapes the interior life of a person in the first weeks of the year. According to Padre Pio, the start of a new year is when habits either become anchors or chains. He insisted that the soul is especially impressionable during this time because it stands between what has ended and what has not yet fully begun. People feel a mixture of hope and uncertainty. They want renewal, but they also fear disappointment. Padre Pio taught that this emotional openness makes the soul vulnerable to suggestion. Not all suggestions come from God. Many arise from distraction, discouragement, and a quiet erosion of discipline. He frequently warned against what he called spiritual looseness. This looseness does not mean abandoning faith, but relaxing it just enough to weaken its force. A person still believes, still prays occasionally, still considers themselves faithful, but no longer fights for interior order. Padre Pio said that when the year begins without structure, the soul drifts. Drift, in his teaching, is never neutral. It always carries the soul away from peace, even if slowly. One of his most repeated cautions concerned interior noise. At the beginning of the year, life accelerates quickly. Work resumes, obligations multiply, information floods the mind. Padre Pio taught that many people fill the early months with activity to avoid facing silence. Silence, he said, is where truth speaks. When silence is avoided, unresolved fears and wounds remain buried but active. This interior noise creates agitation that people mistake for stress or personality, when in fact it is a soul that has not been recollected. Padre Pio emphasized that recollection is not optional, it is the condition for peace. Without it, prayer becomes mechanical, and God's presence feels distant. He warned that many believers begin the year with sincere intentions, but no concrete rhythm of prayer. Intentions without structure, he said, are easily overridden by fatigue. Fatigue dulls vigilance. Once vigilance is dulled, peace becomes fragile. This is why he urged daily prayer to be short but fixed, consistent rather than intense, especially in ordinary time. He also spoke at length about spiritual protection. Padre Pio insisted that protection is not automatic simply because one believes. Faith must be lived, not assumed. He warned that many people rely on past devotion as if it were present strength. The enemy, he said, respects only current resistance. Yesterday's prayer does not shield today's soul. At the beginning of the year, many unconsciously live on spiritual credit rather than active grace. When difficulties arise, they are surprised by how quickly they feel overwhelmed. Fear was another theme Padre Pio addressed directly. He observed that the early months of the year often awaken anxiety about the future: finances, health, family stability, uncertainty. He taught that fear, when not surrendered, becomes a form of silent consent to unrest. Fear itself is not sin, but dwelling in it weakens trust. Padre Pio warned that the enemy does not need to destroy faith. He only needs to keep the soul preoccupied with what might go wrong. A soul consumed by future fears cannot remain at peace in the present. He also noted a particular danger in self-reliance at the beginning of the year. Many people resolve to do better, be stronger, or fix things through personal effort alone. Padre Pio respected discipline, but he warned against pride, disguised as determination. When people rely excessively on their own strength, frustration follows quickly. Failure then feels personal and humiliating. Padre Pio taught that this leads to discouragement, which is far more damaging than weakness. Discouragement convinces the soul to stop trying altogether. In the confessional, he often encountered souls who felt they had already failed the new year within its first weeks. They were ashamed of returning with the same struggles, the same sins, the same fears. Padre Pio corrected them firmly. He taught that returning is not failure, refusing to return is. The beginning of the year, he said, is not a test of perfection, but a test of humility. God does not expect immediate transformation, he expects perseverance. Peace grows where perseverance replaces self-judgment. Padre Pio also warned against neglecting sacramentals during this time. He believed that simple acts, the sign of the cross made attentively, holy water used with faith, a blessed object treated with reverence, create a spiritual atmosphere that resists disturbance. At the beginning of the year, many neglect these practices, viewing them as secondary. Padre Pio disagreed. He taught that visible signs reinforce invisible realities. When the visible is neglected, the invisible weakens. Another subtle danger he identified was comparison. At the start of the year, people measure themselves against others. Who is progressing, who is succeeding, who appears at peace. Padre Pio warned that comparison poisons gratitude. Gratitude, he taught, is the soil of peace. When gratitude is replaced by envy or self-contempt, peace withers. He urged souls to focus on fidelity, not outcomes. God measures love, not visible success. Perhaps his most sobering teaching concerned delay. Padre Pio said, the enemy rarely says, do not pray. He says later, later in the day, later in the week, later in the year. At the beginning of the year, this voice is especially persuasive. People tell themselves they will establish prayer once things settle. Padre Pio insisted that things never settle on their own. Order must be imposed through choice. Delay, he said, is the thief of spiritual beginnings. Throughout his life, Padre Pio returned to one unchanging truth. Peace is preserved through vigilance, not intensity. The soul that quietly guards prayer, humility, and trust at the beginning of the year will remain stable even when trials come. The soul that relaxes discipline will experience unrest even without obvious cause. These patterns, he insisted, are not punishment but consequence. What Padre Pio revealed is unsettling precisely because it is simple. The early weeks of the year do not destroy peace by force. They expose whether peace was anchored or only felt. According to his teaching, the soul that recognizes this moment and responds with humility and structure will regain stability. The soul that ignores it will spend the year asking why peace vanished, unaware that it slipped away gradually through choices that once seemed insignificant. Padre Pio went even deeper when he spoke about what truly destabilizes people at the beginning of the year. He insisted that the greatest danger is not suffering, temptation, or even failure, but confusion about where peace actually comes from. Many people, he observed, unknowingly tie their sense of peace to external stability, health, finances, harmony in relationships, or clear plans for the future. When these elements are uncertain, as they often are at the start of a new year, peace collapses. Padre Pio warned that this kind of peace is not peace at all, but emotional balance masquerading as spiritual security. He taught that true peace is not the absence of problems, but the presence of God within disorder. At the beginning of the year, disorder becomes more visible. Responsibilities accumulate, unexpected events arise, old struggles resurface. Padre Pio said this exposure is not a curse, but a revelation. It reveals whether a soul has been anchored in God or merely comforted by circumstances. When circumstances shift, the illusion of peace is shattered, and many interpret this as abandonment. Padre Pio rejected that interpretation completely. He taught that God is often closest when peace feels most fragile. One of his most challenging teachings concerned spiritual dryness. He warned that many people experience dryness early in the year and immediately assume something is wrong. Prayer feels empty, God feels distant, motivation weakens. Padre Pio insisted that this dryness is not always a sign of decline, but often a test of maturity. Emotional consolation, he taught, is not the foundation of faith. Fidelity is. When consolation fades, the soul is invited to love God without reward. Those who misunderstand this moment often abandon prayer just when it is becoming most valuable. Padre Pio spoke sharply about impatience during this season. People want immediate results, quick change, rapid improvement, visible progress. When these do not appear, discouragement sets in. He warned that impatience corrodes trust. God works slowly, he said, because he is shaping depth, not appearances. At the beginning of the year, impatience is especially dangerous because it convinces people that nothing is happening when, in reality, foundations are being laid invisibly. The soul that cannot tolerate slow growth will never sustain lasting peace. He also addressed guilt that surfaces early in the year. Many people carry unresolved guilt from the past year into the new one. They promise themselves change, but secretly doubt it is possible. Padre Pio taught that this hidden self-condemnation becomes a constant interior accusation. The enemy, he said, does not need to invent new sins. He simply keeps old ones alive in memory. Peace cannot exist where the soul constantly rehearses its failures instead of surrendering them to mercy. In this context, Padre Pio emphasized confession with unusual urgency, not as a ritual obligation, but as a spiritual reset. He warned that beginning the year without confession often leaves the soul carrying invisible weight. That weight manifests as irritability, heaviness, lack of joy, and fatigue. He insisted that many people try to pray their way forward while refusing to release what burdens them. Prayer, he said, cannot flow freely when the heart remains closed in shame or fear. Another core warning concerned control. At the start of the year, people attempt to control outcomes more aggressively. Schedules, plans, finances, relationships. Padre Pio taught that excessive control is a symptom of fear, not responsibility. When control becomes the source of security, peace becomes conditional. The smallest disruption then produces disproportionate anxiety. He insisted that surrender, not control, is the soul's true safeguard. A surrendered soul remains stable even when plans collapse. Padre Pio also observed that many people unconsciously resist joy during this time. They fear disappointment, so they keep hope restrained. He taught that this guarded hope slowly suffocates peace. Peace, he said, requires openness. It does not mean naivety, but trust. A soul that refuses to hope fully cannot rest. It remains vigilant in the wrong way, guarding itself instead of entrusting itself to God. He spoke with particular seriousness about isolation. Early in the year, many withdraw inwardly. They become quieter, more private, less willing to share struggles. Padre Pio warned that isolation amplifies unrest. Temptations grow louder in silence without accountability. He urged souls to remain connected through community, spiritual guidance, or shared prayer. Peace, he taught, is strengthened in communion, not solitude chosen out of fear. Padre Pio's insight into spiritual attacks was never sensational. He insisted that most attacks are psychological before they are spiritual. Discouraging thoughts, self-doubt, interior accusations, exaggerated fears, these weaken resistance. When the mind is disturbed, the heart follows. At the beginning of the year, when people are already evaluating themselves and their lives, these thoughts find fertile ground. Padre Pio taught that not every thought deserves attention. Peace is preserved by refusing to dialogue with interior voices that contradict trust. He also warned against neglecting the present moment. Many people at the beginning of the year live mentally in the future or the past. They replay regrets or obsess over outcomes. Padre Pio insisted that peace exists only in the present because God acts only there. A soul that abandons the present abandons God's active presence. Anxiety multiplies when attention is scattered across time. What made Padre Pio's teaching so unsettling was his clarity. The loss of peace at the beginning of the year is rarely caused by one dramatic failure. It is the accumulation of small interior choices made without awareness. He taught that vigilance is not tension, but attention. The soul that pays attention to its interior movements, fear, impatience, resentment, distraction, can correct course quickly. The soul that ignores them drifts. Ultimately, Padre Pio revealed that the beginning of the year is a mirror. It reflects not how strong a person feels, but how rooted they are. Those rooted in habit, control, or emotion will feel shaken. Those rooted in surrender, humility, and perseverance will remain stable even when peace feels tested. According to his teaching, unrest at this time is not meant to condemn, but to awaken. It signals that something essential requires attention. Padre Pio believed that God allows this unrest not to punish, but to invite depth. The soul that responds with honesty, discipline, and trust will not only recover peace, but deepen it. The soul that resists this invitation will continue searching externally for what can only be restored internally. The beginning of the year, he taught, does not reveal God's absence. It reveals where the soul has been placing its security all along. Padre Pio was uncompromising when he spoke about one particular mistake that causes many people to lose peace early in the year. They wait for peace to return before they change anything. He warned that this logic is backwards. Peace does not come first, order comes first. Surrender comes first, discipline comes first, peace follows. According to Padre Pio, the soul that waits to feel better before praying, forgiving, or returning to God will wait indefinitely. He taught that obedience precedes consolation, not the other way around. He insisted that the beginning of the year exposes whether faith is conditional. Many people pray when they feel strong, grateful, or hopeful. When those feelings disappear, prayer collapses. Padre Pio warned that this pattern leaves the soul defenseless precisely when it most needs protection. He taught that prayer offered in dryness, confusion, or fatigue has greater spiritual weight than prayer offered in comfort. Peace grows in fidelity, not in emotion. One of his most difficult teachings concerned resistance. Padre Pio observed that many believers unconsciously resist the very practices that would restore peace. They avoid silence because silence reveals unrest. They avoid confession because confession demands humility. They avoid sustained prayer because it confronts distraction. He warned that this resistance often disguises itself as busyness or realism. In truth, it is fear of facing what has been neglected. Padre Pio spoke often about interior discipline. He did not mean rigidity or harsh self-control, but intentional order. At the beginning of the year, he urged people to establish fixed moments of prayer, however brief. He taught that consistency matters more than duration. A short prayer faithfully kept, he said, stabilizes the soul more than long prayers practiced sporadically. Peace depends on rhythm. Without rhythm, the interior life becomes chaotic. He also warned against negotiating with spiritual duties. Many people tell themselves they will pray when things calm down, or forgive when they feel ready. Padre Pio rejected this logic. He taught that readiness follows obedience. Waiting for the right feeling only strengthens avoidance. He insisted that the will must lead the heart, not follow it. The heart eventually conforms to the direction chosen by the will. Another critical insight concerned unresolved resentment. Padre Pio said that peace cannot coexist with hidden bitterness. At the beginning of the year, many carry unresolved anger from the past year into the new one. They justify it as self-protection or realism. Padre Pio warned that unforgiveness is never neutral. It creates constant interior agitation, even when the person believes they have moved on. He taught that forgiveness is not agreement or approval. It is the refusal to let resentment govern the interior life. He spoke with particular clarity about fear of vulnerability. Many people resist peace because peace requires trust. Trust requires letting go of control. At the start of the year, control feels safer than surrender. Padre Pio warned that this illusion keeps the soul tense. A controlled life may appear stable, but it is internally fragile. The slightest disruption produces anxiety. True peace, he taught, comes from entrustment, not management. Padre Pio also addressed the temptation to spiritualize avoidance. Some people explain their unrest as God's will or a cross, while refusing to examine their habits. He warned that this misuses spirituality to excuse negligence. Suffering accepted in obedience sanctifies. Suffering caused by neglect does not. Peace cannot grow where responsibility is avoided under religious language. He was especially severe about distractions that dominate the mind. At the beginning of the year, many people flood themselves with information, noise, and constant stimulation. Padre Pio taught that a distracted mind cannot remain peaceful. Peace requires interior space. He urged souls to deliberately reduce unnecessary noise, not only external, but internal. Endless mental commentary, worry, and self-analysis suffocate peace. Silence, he said, is not emptiness, but availability. Padre Pio also warned against excessive self-focus. At the start of the year, people evaluate themselves relentlessly. Progress, failures, resolutions, outcomes. He taught that constant self-measurement creates instability. The soul becomes obsessed with performance instead of presence. Peace grows when attention shifts from self to God. When prayer becomes less about feeling something and more about offering oneself, rest returns. He frequently reminded souls that peace is not fragile by nature. It is fragile only when rooted in the wrong place. Peace, rooted in success, approval, health, or clarity, will collapse. Peace, rooted in surrender, endures. At the beginning of the year, when uncertainty is unavoidable, misplaced roots are exposed. This exposure is not meant to discourage, but to correct. Padre Pio emphasized that many people unknowingly fight peace. They cling to worry as a form of vigilance. They believe that letting go is irresponsible. He taught that worry is not vigilance. It is mistrust disguised as responsibility. A vigilant soul prays. A worried soul ruminates. Peace grows when vigilance replaces rumination. He also spoke about spiritual laziness with striking honesty. He warned that laziness is not always inactivity. Sometimes it is avoidance of interior effort. A person may work constantly, yet avoid the effort of prayer, repentance, or self-examination. Padre Pio taught that this avoidance weakens the soul more than visible sin. Peace requires effort directed inward, not constant motion outward. What made Padre Pio's teaching so difficult to accept was its personal nature. He did not blame circumstances, people, or fate for unrest. He located the cause in daily choices. Not dramatic ones, but repeated ones. Peace is not lost suddenly. It is surrendered gradually through neglect, delay, and resistance. Yet, his message was never hopeless. He insisted that peace can be restored at any moment through humility. A single sincere act, returning to prayer, forgiving an offense, surrendering control, can reverse the trajectory. God, he taught, does not require long explanations. He responds to obedience. Peace follows obedience, as light follows the opening of a window. Padre Pio believed that the beginning of the year is merciful precisely because unrest appears early. It gives the soul time to correct course. Those who respond quickly regain stability. Those who ignore the warning spend months searching for peace externally. According to his teaching, peace is not missing. It is waiting to be chosen. Padre Pio was adamant that the loss of peace at the beginning of the year is not the final stage of the struggle, but the turning point where the soul either recovers direction or slowly hardens into resignation. He warned that many people misunderstand this moment. They believe unrest means they are failing spiritually, when in reality it often means God is calling them to a deeper, more honest faith. According to Padre Pio, the most dangerous response to early year unrest is not fear, but indifference. The quiet decision to live without peace and accept it as normal. He observed that once people normalize unrest, they stop seeking healing. Prayer becomes functional instead of relational. Faith becomes habit instead of surrender. The soul adapts to tension and learns to survive without interior rest. Padre Pio warned that this adaptation is far more destructive than open struggle. A soul that still fights feels pain, but a soul that resigns stops listening. Peace cannot return where longing has died. One of his strongest warnings concerned distraction as anesthesia. When peace is lost, many people immediately fill their lives with activity, entertainment, noise, and constant engagement. Padre Pio taught that this is not relief, but numbing. Distraction dulls awareness of unrest without resolving its cause. Over time, the soul loses sensitivity. Prayer feels flat. Silence feels empty. God's presence feels abstract. Padre Pio insisted that peace cannot coexist with constant interior stimulation because peace requires receptivity, not consumption. He also spoke directly about spiritual pride that appears after repeated struggle. Some people tell themselves they are simply realistic or strong enough to live without consolation. Padre Pio rejected this mindset. He taught that refusing to seek peace is not maturity, but wounded pride. God does not ask his children to endure unnecessary unrest. He invites them to rest in him. Refusing that invitation hardens the heart. Another critical insight concerned the refusal to forgive oneself. At the beginning of the year, many people carry regret from the past year. Even after confession, they continue to accuse themselves internally. Padre Pio warned that this self-accusation keeps the soul imprisoned. Mercy accepted intellectually but rejected emotionally blocks peace. He insisted that humility includes accepting forgiveness, not rehearsing failure. A soul that clings to self-condemnation remains focused on itself rather than on God. Padre Pio emphasized that interior peace is inseparable from truth. Many people live with hidden compromises, rationalizations, or half-surrenders. They give God part of their life while protecting certain fears, habits, or attachments. He warned that peace cannot grow in divided ground. God does not force entry. He waits. Unrest, he said, often persists because the soul is negotiating instead of surrendering. Partial surrender produces partial peace, which collapses under pressure. He also addressed fear of change. At the start of the year, God often invites concrete adjustments, different priorities, reordered schedules, reconciled relationships, renewed prayer. Many resist because change feels threatening. Padre Pio taught that fear of change is fear of losing control. Yet he insisted that what is surrendered is never lost. It is transformed. Peace cannot return if the soul clings to what God is asking it to release. Padre Pio spoke with urgency about perseverance. He warned that many people begin the year with sincere efforts but abandon them quickly when results are not immediate. He taught that peace is not restored through intensity but through endurance. Small daily acts of fidelity accumulate power silently. The soul that perseveres without visible reward builds an interior strength that cannot be shaken. Those who stop too soon never experience this stability. He also warned against spiritual isolation disguised as independence. Some people withdraw from guidance, community, or accountability because they want to manage their struggles privately. Padre Pio taught that this isolation weakens discernment. Without external perspective, the soul magnifies its fears and minimizes grace. Peace grows where humility allows support. He insisted that God often restores peace through human mediation, confession, counsel, shared prayer. Another theme he emphasized was trust in suffering. Padre Pio did not promise a year free from difficulty. He promised a year anchored in meaning. He taught that peace does not mean the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. When suffering is accepted without trust, it becomes destructive. When accepted with surrender, it deepens peace even amid hardship. At the beginning of the year, many confuse peace with comfort. Padre Pio corrected this misunderstanding firmly. He also warned against interpreting unanswered prayers as rejection. Early in the year, many people pray for clarity, solutions, or relief and feel unheard. Padre Pio taught that God often answers by strengthening endurance rather than changing circumstances. The soul that expects immediate solutions becomes restless. The soul that trusts God's timing remains calm, even without explanations. Peace, he insisted, is rooted in trust, not outcomes. Padre Pio placed enormous importance on intention. He taught that the direction of the heart matters more than emotional state. A soul may feel weak, distracted, or dry, yet remain at peace if its intention is firm. Conversely, a soul may feel enthusiastic but restless if its intention is divided. At the beginning of the year, he urged people to renew intention daily, to belong to God, regardless of feelings. This simple act, he said, stabilizes the interior life more than any resolution. He also addressed the fear of permanence. Many people fear that unrest means it will last all year. Padre Pio rejected this fear. He taught that unrest is often temporary and corrective. It exposes where growth is needed. When the soul responds, peace returns in a deeper form. The tragedy, he said, is not unrest itself, but refusal to learn from it. What Padre Pio revealed through all these warnings is that peace is not fragile by nature. It becomes fragile only when it is treated as optional. Peace is a responsibility. It must be protected, chosen, and renewed. The beginning of the year tests whether the soul will take this responsibility seriously or surrender it to habit, fear, or distraction. Padre Pio believed that God allows unrest early precisely because he desires stability later. The soul that responds with humility, perseverance, and surrender will not only recover peace, but carry it through trials that would otherwise overwhelm it. The soul that ignores this moment will continue searching externally for what can only be restored internally. According to his teaching, peace is never far away. It waits patiently for the soul to stop running and return. Padre Pio concluded his warnings about the beginning of the year with a message that was both severe and deeply consoling. Peace is never lost beyond recovery, but it is rarely restored without a decision. He taught that God does not abandon the soul in times of unrest. Rather, he waits for the soul to stop running from itself. According to Padre Pio, the early months of the year are a mercy precisely because they expose instability before it becomes permanent. What feels like loss, he said, is often an invitation. He insisted that many people misunderstand God's silence at this time. They interpret it as distance, punishment, or indifference. Padre Pio rejected this interpretation firmly. He taught that God's silence is often the space in which the soul must finally listen. When distractions fade and emotional supports weaken, the soul is confronted with what truly governs it. This confrontation is uncomfortable, but necessary. Peace cannot be restored until false securities are exposed. Padre Pio spoke with clarity about responsibility. He warned that peace is not something God imposes on an unwilling soul. God offers grace continuously, but he respects freedom. A soul that refuses order, discipline, forgiveness, or surrender cannot remain peaceful, not because God withholds peace, but because peace cannot coexist with resistance. According to him, the beginning of the year tests whether the soul is willing to cooperate or merely complain. He emphasized that restoration of peace does not require extraordinary actions. It requires ordinary fidelity, a return to daily prayer, however brief, a sincere confession without self-justification, a conscious act of forgiveness, even without emotional relief, a deliberate surrender of control, renewed each morning. Padre Pio taught that these simple acts realign the soul more effectively than dramatic resolutions. Peace grows quietly when obedience replaces negotiation. He also warned against waiting for perfect conditions. Many people postpone change until life feels calmer. Padre Pio insisted that calm rarely precedes obedience, it follows it. The soul that waits for peace before acting will remain paralyzed. The soul that acts despite unrest discovers that peace follows courage. This reversal of logic was central to his teaching. God responds to movement toward him, not to passive longing. Padre Pio placed particular emphasis on humility at the start of the year. He taught that humility is not self-criticism, but truth. Truth about weakness, truth about dependence, truth about the need for God. A humble soul does not panic when peace is disturbed. It returns, it asks for help, it accepts correction. Pride, by contrast, isolates the soul and turns unrest into shame. Peace cannot return where pride refuses to bend. He also addressed perseverance with urgency. Padre Pio warned that many people make sincere changes but abandon them quickly when discomfort persists. He taught that peace often returns gradually, not instantly. The soul must endure a period of purification. This endurance strengthens trust. A peace gained quickly is often shallow. A peace regained through perseverance is stable. According to him, the soul must learn to remain faithful without immediate consolation. Another essential element in his final teaching was trust in God's timing. Padre Pio cautioned against demanding immediate clarity or relief. God often works invisibly at the beginning of the year, reshaping priorities and attachments beneath the surface. The soul that insists on understanding everything becomes restless. The soul that consents to mystery remains calm. Peace, he taught, grows where trust replaces explanation. He also warned against interpreting early year struggles as signs of failure. He insisted that struggle often indicates engagement. A soul that feels nothing and wants nothing is far more endangered than a soul that feels unrest and seeks God. Unrest, he said, proves that the soul still cares. God can work with a soul that struggles. He cannot work with a soul that has closed itself. Padre Pio spoke movingly about hope. He warned that many people fear hoping at the beginning of the year because they dread disappointment. He taught that hope is not optimism about outcomes, but confidence in God's presence. A hopeful soul remains open. A closed soul becomes tense. Peace requires openness. Without hope, peace suffocates. According to him, hope must be chosen deliberately when feelings resist it. He also emphasized the importance of anchoring the year spiritually, not through vague intentions, but through concrete offering. He urged souls to entrust the year to God daily, not once. Each morning becomes a renewal. Each evening becomes a surrender. This rhythm, he taught, transforms ordinary time into protected time. The year becomes a path, not a threat. Peace grows where time is consecrated, not merely endured. Padre Pio's final warning was simple and direct. Do not ignore unrest. He taught that unrest is a messenger. It points to what needs attention. When ignored, it grows louder. When addressed, it diminishes. God does not send unrest to torment, but to awaken. The soul that listens regains stability. The soul that numbs itself loses sensitivity. Yet his final word was never fear but mercy. He insisted that no soul is beyond restoration. Peace can return at any moment through a single sincere act of surrender. God does not demand explanations, just consent. According to Padre Pio, the most powerful prayer at the beginning of the year is not eloquent, but honest, a heart laid open without defense. He believed that God allows this early year vulnerability because he desires depth, not illusion. A peace built on truth will endure trials that would otherwise destroy it. The beginning of the year, he taught, is not a curse but a grace. It reveals what must change while there is still time. In the end, Padre Pio left believers with a choice: to drift through the year, searching for peace in circumstances, or to guard peace intentionally through humility, discipline, and trust. The loss of peace is never the end of the story. It is the signal that the soul is being invited to something more real, more stable, and more free. According to Padre Pio, the question is not whether peace will be tested. It always will be. The question is whether the soul will respond with resistance or surrender. Those who surrender will not escape trials, but they will carry peace through them. Those who resist will chase peace endlessly without finding it. The beginning of the year decides nothing irrevocably, but it reveals everything essential. And for the soul willing to listen, it marks not a loss